On your knees. Hands where I can see them." The words cut through the furnace air like a rifle shot. Officer Laura Hendricks, face red beneath mirrored glasses, stood with her Glock leveled at the temple of a man who hadn't moved an inch. General Marcus Thompson, though she didn't know his name, stood beside his black government SUV on the baking shoulder of I-35, sweat running into his collar. He had pulled over only to fix his encrypted GPS. Now a gun was pointed at his head. Before we go into this story, where are you watching from? Take a moment, subscribe to the channel, and give this story a like. It helps more people hear what justice really sounds like. The heat that day could melt the breath out of a man. 104 degrees. The kind of Texas afternoon where the asphalt rippled like black glass. Thompson's engine was still running, dashboard flashing a red GPS error when Hendricks's patrol car came roaring up behind him. She had seen the black driver, the federal plates, the dark SUV, and made up her mind before she ever stepped out. "Driver, on your knees now!" she barked again, voice cracking through the radio hum. Thompson raised his hands slowly, calm as if walking through a minefield. "Ma'am, I can explain. Don't talk. On the ground," she snapped. He took one step forward, trying to show his palms. But Hendricks was already moving. The steel of her boot slammed behind his knee. Thompson dropped hard, gravel burning his skin through the thin gray t-shirt he wore instead of uniform. The taste of metal filled his mouth. She yanked his arms back and clamped the cuffs tight, so tight they bit his wrists. Then came the cold circle of the gun barrel pressing into his temple. "One twitch, and you're done," she hissed. Thompson didn't fight. He'd been through worse. In Fallujah, in Kandahar, in the silence of Arlington where he'd buried his son. He'd once carried a bleeding Marine 200 yards through enemy fire. But nothing in all his years had prepared him for being treated like this, on American soil, by someone wearing the same flag he'd sworn to protect. His voice came out low, steady. "Ma'am, that vehicle you're touching belongs to the United States Army. Check the plates before you do something you can't undo." But she didn't listen. She was sweating through her uniform, jaw locked, eyes wild. "You think plates mean you can sneak anything across this highway? We've been told about your kind." The words hung in the air. Your kind. Thompson's jaw flexed, but he didn't move. He heard a faint buzzing, then a soft click, the sound of a cell phone camera nearby, down the shoulder. A teenage boy had stepped out of a dusty pickup. His phone raised, recording Jamal Carter, 16 years old, an aspiring journalist from San Marcos High, had been on his way home from summer work. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. A police officer screaming at a calm, older black man, gun to his head, federal plates glinting under the sun. His hands shook as he whispered into the mic. "Live on I-35. Officers got a man at gunpoint. I think he's not doing anything wrong." The feed went live. Within minutes, 100 viewers became 1,000, then tens of thousands. The hashtag I-35 Injustice began to crawl across screens. Thompson, still kneeling in the burning gravel, noticed the boy. His military instinct clicked. He tilted his head just slightly, voice barely above a whisper. "Son, zoom in on her badge, 472. Let the world see." The boy nodded, tears forming in his eyes. Hendricks saw him then, turned like lightning. "Put that phone down," she shouted, advancing, gun swinging in his direction. "Delete that or I'll. Don't you point that at my kid." Jamal's father yelled from the pickup, rushing forward, one hand raised. Hendricks froze. The weapon caught between 3 targets, the boy, the father, and the man still kneeling in the heat. Thompson's voice came again, calm, commanding, like a general briefing a unit before battle. "Ma'am, you're escalating. Step back. Lower your weapon." For a second, it almost worked, but the panic in her eyes deepened. She'd been reported before, 5 times. buried each complaint under paperwork and favors. The last thing she could afford was another viral video. Not again, she thought. Not another camera. Her ex-husband had once recorded her rage during a fight. She'd never forgotten the humiliation of seeing herself like that. She shoved Thompson forward. His face hit the gravel, skin tearing open along his cheekbone. The sound of him hitting the ground sent a collective gasp through the live stream audience. Now over 500,000. "Stop!" Jamal screamed, voice cracking. "You're hurting him!" Thompson blinked, vision blurring from the heat. He remembered another son, another stretch of dirt road. Fallujah, 2004, bullets snapping overhead, the smell of smoke and diesel. Different desert, same hate. He thought. "Ma'am," he said softly, his cheek pressed against the earth. "I've led 40,000 soldiers. I've walked through worse than this, but you're about to do something you can't ever take back." Hendricks hesitated. For the first time, her hands trembled. The gun wavered. A radio crackled in her patrol car. "Unit 9-4, status check." She ignored it. Sweat ran into Thompson's eyes. He turned his head slightly toward the boy. "Keep filming," he whispered. "History is watching." Jamal swallowed hard, tears cutting clean lines through the dust on his face. The camera caught every detail: the barrel against the general's temple, the badge number, the federal license plate. Viewers online began tagging news outlets, senators, military veterans. The story was out of her control now. Up the road, a siren wailed closer. A second patrol car. Deputy Carlos Ramirez stepped out, saw the scene, and froze. His face went white. He knew that plate number. He'd seen it on federal security bulletins. The black SUV assigned to General Marcus Thompson, the highest-ranking active black officer in the U.S. Army. "Laura!" he shouted, sprinting forward. "What the hell are you doing? That's a 4-star general!" Hendricks blinked, disoriented, as if the heat had finally cracked her mind. "What are you talking about? He's not!" Ramirez was already unclipping his radio. "Dispatch! Code red! Get the sheriff on the line! We've got a major situation!" Thompson turned his head just enough to speak, his voice hoarse but steady. "Deputy, I'm calling the Pentagon." He shifted his weight, reached slowly toward his front pocket where a small encrypted phone lay beneath his ID badge. Ramirez helped him sit up, his hands shaking as he unlocked the cuffs. Thompson dialed a number burned into his memory. "Major Vasquez," he said, breath controlled. Code black. Coordinates 29.7211, negative 98.3461. Weapon to my head. On the other end of the line, silence for 1 second. Then, "Understood. Sir, stay down." The sound of helicopter rotors was faint at first, then grew louder, like thunder rolling across the desert. Hendricks backed away, trembling. Her gun slipped from her grip, clattering to the asphalt. Dust swirled around her boots as black SUVs came over the horizon. For the first time in her career, Officer Laura Hendricks looked small, dwarfed by her own fear, her own choices, and in that moment. As the live stream crossed 1 million views and counting, General Marcus Thompson lifted his head from the ground. Eyes calm, voice quiet enough for the microphone to catch. "Restraint," he said, "is still the most powerful weapon on Earth. Delete that video right now, kid, or I swear I'll shoot." Officer Laura Hendricks's voice sliced through the air, trembling between rage and fear. The pistol she'd just had against the general's head was now aimed at a 16-year-old boy holding a cracked phone. Jamal Carter didn't move. He stood barefoot on the side of I-35, dust coating his ankles, his heart pounding loud enough to drown out the sirens echoing somewhere in the distance. The live stream timer in the corner of his screen read 000428. Almost 500,000 people were watching. Before we go any deeper, where are you watching from? If this story moves you, subscribe and hit like, Because what happens next is what turned one small act of courage into a movement that shook an entire state. Jamal's hands trembled, but he kept the phone steady. "You're live, ma'am," he said softly. "Everyone's watching." Hendricks' breathing turned ragged. "Turn it off! Now!" she screamed. She lunged toward him, heavy boots crunching gravel. The gun stayed raised, her finger dangerously close to the trigger. Jamal stumbled backward, tripping on the edge of the pavement. His father, Darnell Carter, jumped from their truck and threw himself between them. "You touch my boy and you're finished!" he shouted, spreading his arms wide. Thompson, still half-cuffed and bleeding from his cheek, spoke calmly through the chaos. "Jamal, keep filming. Focus on her badge. The truth needs witnesses." The boy's voice cracked. "I'm scared." "Sir, so am I," Thompson said, eyes steady. "But courage isn't the absence of fear. It's moving anyway." Hendricks' jaw tightened. "Stop talking to him," she snapped, then spun back toward Darnell. "You interfere. I'll arrest you both for obstruction." "Obstruction?" Darnell barked, laughing bitterly. "You're the one pointing a gun at an unarmed man on the side of the road." The livestream chat was exploding. Thousands of comments per second. "Who is this officer? That man looks like someone important. Zoom in on the plates. Someone posted. Call the army. He's a general." Screens across the country began lighting up with replays, reposts, and mirror streams inside her patrol car. Hendricks' radio crackled again. 9-4. "What's your status?" She ignored it. She could feel control slipping away. Every word she'd screamed, every shove, every second of that camera lens, burned into the internet forever. She yanked Thompson upright, rage shaking her. "Get up! I said get up!" He stumbled as she slammed him against the SUV, the sound of metal echoing across the highway. The crowd online could hear it. Clear, sharp, real. Blood streaked down his face. But he didn't resist. "Officer," he said quietly, "you're violating every rule of engagement. You think this ends here, but it doesn't. The world's watching you now." "Shut up!" she shouted, pushing him harder, in the back of her mind. A voice whispered something she'd spent years trying to silence. Her ex-husband's voice. "You're just like your father. Violent, bitter, and alone." She had hated that sentence more than anything. Now, looking at the phone pointed at her, she saw it happening again. The loss of control, the shame, the proof. Thompson's calm made it worse. "Ma'am," he said, "I'm not your enemy." That was when she snapped. "Don't tell me who I am," she screamed, slamming the butt of her gun against the SUV beside his head. The camera caught it all. The flash of metal. The flinch, the blood. The live stream hit 1 million viewers. News outlets began to mirror it. On one split screen, CNN anchor Wolf Blitzer's voice broke in. "We're following breaking footage coming out of Texas, where an officer has a firearm drawn on what sources say might be a high-ranking military official." Darnell's phone buzzed with notifications. "It's everywhere," he whispered. "Lord help us." At that moment, Deputy Carlos Ramirez's cruiser skidded to a stop, gravel spraying across the shoulder. "What in God's name is happening here?" he shouted, rushing toward them. "Back off!" Hendricks barked. "I've got this handled." Ramirez's eyes went wide when he saw the plate. Black letters, Federal Seal, U.S. Army Identifier. "Laura," he said, lowering his voice. "Do you even know who this is?" Another smart mouth trying to get himself shot. She snapped. "That's General Marcus Thompson," Ramirez shouted. 4 stars. Commander of the Central Command Group. You just cuffed the highest-ranking black general in the United States Army." The color drained from her face. "You're lying," she whispered. Thompson straightened slowly, his hands still bound. "He's not." Jamal's live stream zoomed in on the moment, her eyes widening, the trembling hand lowering the gun, the sudden silence broken only by wind. The comments section exploded again. "Oh my God, it's true. That's the general from the Medal of Honor ceremony. This woman's done. Hendricks looked around like an animal trapped in light. I didn't know. He didn't. Why didn't you tell me who you were? Thompson stared at her, voice quiet but unflinching. Because I shouldn't have to. Those 5 words rolled through the live stream like thunder. Reporters clipped it instantly. Millions of people replayed the sentence in slow motion. It became a rallying cry overnight. Ramirez moved to unlock the cuffs, but Thompson raised one hand. Not yet, he said. Document everything first. He turned to Jamal. Son, show them the timestamp. Make sure the plates and badge are visible. The boy nodded, zooming in on Hendricks' badge number, 472, her last name, shining clear on the screen. Hendricks stumbled backward, eyes glassy. She reached for her radio. Dispatch, I need. Ramirez cut her off. You need to stand down. Officer, I'm calling the sheriff. You'd better, he said, his voice hardening, because in about 5 minutes, half the Pentagon's gonna be calling him too. The boy's father helped Thompson to his feet. Sir, you okay? Thompson nodded faintly. It's not me I'm worried about. Within seconds, his phone was in his hand. Major Vasquez, he said into the receiver. We have a problem. As he spoke, the live stream audience watched in silence. His voice was calm, disciplined, the same tone he'd used to lead soldiers through gunfire, code black, coordinates 29.7211, negative 98.3461, weapon drawn on federal personnel. Then he hung up. Who was that? Ramirez asked. The Pentagon. Thompson said simply. Hendricks took a shaky step backward. You called the Pentagon? Thompson didn't answer. He turned his gaze toward the boy. Jamal, keep that camera steady. The faint whir of helicopters was already rolling through the heat. The live stream chat went wild. That's military response. They're coming for her. This is history right now. Hendricks lowered her weapon, the weight of realization pressing into her chest like concrete. I didn't mean. You meant every second, Thompson said, his voice still steady. That's the problem. The heat shimmered off the asphalt as dust began to rise from the horizon. Black SUVs in formation. The unmistakable sound of rotor blades closing in. Jamal's camera captured Hendricks' face in that moment. Sweat streaking down her temples, tears she couldn't hide. The dawning horror of what she had done. The chat slowed for a full minute. The world watched in silence as the camera stayed on her. Then Thompson's voice, calm and heavy with authority, broke through the static. History doesn't need more hate, he said. It needs witnesses brave enough to tell the truth. Jamal wiped his eyes, whispered to his viewers. We're witnessing it right now. By the 10-minute mark, the live stream hit 1.2 million views, and in those few breathless moments before the helicopters landed, Texas and the nation had already changed. Code black confirmed, coordinates locked, air assets inbound. The voice on the other end of the line was sharp, calm, and cold as steel. Major Elena Vasquez didn't ask questions. She didn't need to. The moment General Marcus Thompson spoke those words, the Pentagon's crisis protocol came alive. Satellite eyes, encrypted channels, and unmarked vehicles already moving before he ended the call. Before we continue, take a second, subscribe, and tell me where you're watching from. What happens in these next 18 minutes is the kind of truth no movie could invent. The desert wind pressed against the highway like a furnace. Dust devils twisted across the shoulder while the sun began to sink behind the low Texas hills. General Thompson lowered his phone, wiped a line of blood from his cheek, and turned toward Officer Laura Hendricks. Her hand was still shaking, the Glock now dangling loosely at her side. Deputy Ramirez stood between them, breathing hard, his own radio crackling with overlapping voices. Laura, listen to me, he said, eyes locked on her weapon. You need to put that gun down. Now. She shook her head, still trapped between denial and dread. They can't send the military for this. It's just a stop. Thompson's voice cut through the heat, even and level. This isn't a stop anymore. It's an international incident with a live feed. The boy, Jamal, still held his phone high. The stream hadn't stopped. A small red circle blinked in the corner. 1.4 million viewers. The entire world was watching the countdown, inside the Pentagon. Alarms were silent but constant. A large digital map marked the coordinates in red. Vasquez stood beside a cluster of uniformed officers as data scrolled down her tablet. "Deploy Quick Response Unit Delta," she ordered. "ETA 18 minutes. Maintain visual confirmation." Back on I-35, a low rumble began to tremble through the air. Not helicopters yet. Engines, heavy ones. Ramirez turned to Thompson. "Sir, what's going to happen when they get here?" "They'll secure the site," Thompson said. "And they'll ask for her badge." Hendricks stared at him like he'd just pronounced her sentence. "You can't. You don't have that kind of authority." He met her eyes. "Ma'am, I don't need authority. I have accountability. That's what you forgot." Ramirez's radio blared again. "Comal dispatch to Unit 94. Confirm code black. Be advised. Multiple federal signals are converging on your location." He exhaled slowly. They know. The camera caught everything. The red sunset spreading across the highway. The trembling officer. The general standing tall despite the blood on his face. The comment section had slowed to near silence, like the audience itself was holding its breath. Thompson looked toward the horizon. He could hear it now, the low, growing thunder of rotors slicing through dry air. The Blackhawks, right on time. 18 minutes. He murmured. Hendricks spun toward her patrol car, fumbling for the radio mic. "Dispatch, this is Officer Hendricks. Badge 472, I need immediate backup." The response came cold. Sheriff Harlan Brooks' voice, rough with age. "Laura, put the radio down." "Sheriff, I've got a..." "I said, put it down." A pause. "You're on your own. Officer Hendricks. The state can't shield you from this." Her lips trembled. "Sir, please." But the line went dead. That was when the first helicopter swept overhead, scattering dust and sand in a violent spiral. The roar drowned out everything. Jamal's phone shook with the wind, the screen flickering as viewers screamed in the chat. Ramirez covered his face. Hendricks crouched instinctively, hands over her ears. 3 unmarked black SUVs appeared from the northbound lane, tires screeching as they swerved to the shoulder in perfect formation. Doors flew open, and soldiers in tactical gear stepped out, silent, precise, deliberate. A tall black woman in a crisp combat uniform approached, hair pulled tight, expression carved in stone. Colonel Victoria Lang. Her boots crunched the gravel as she strode past the boy, past Ramirez, and stopped in front of Thompson. She saluted. "Sir." Thompson nodded faintly. "Colonel." She turned to Hendricks. "Officer Laura Hendricks, Comal County Sheriff's Department." Hendricks' mouth opened, but no words came. Lang's tone was cold enough to stop the wind. "You are relieved of duty. Effective immediately." She extended her hand. "Badge and weapon." Hendricks froze. I didn't know who he was." Lang didn't blink. "That's the point." Ramirez stepped forward, gently taking the gun from Hendricks' limp hand. "Do what she says." "Laura." The colonel's team moved like shadows, securing the perimeter, blocking traffic from both directions, documenting everything. One soldier set up a portable satellite transmitter. Another collected the live stream metadata directly from Jamal's phone. Tagging the footage as federal evidence, the helicopters circled lower, kicking up waves of dust. Onlookers miles away were already pulling over, filming the scene as if history itself had landed on the side of the highway. Lang glanced back at Thompson. "Medical support's 2 minutes out. Sir, do you require evacuation?" He shook his head. "I'm fine, but she needs to stay right here." Lang looked to her team. "Understood." Then she leaned closer, voice dropping so only he could hear. "Sir," Washington's lit up. "The Secretary of Defense wants a full report within the hour. Tell him I'll call in 20, Thompson said. "Right now. I need her to understand what she almost did." He took a slow step toward Hendricks. The soldiers didn't interfere. The wind had stilled. The only sound was the faint hum of the choppers holding position above them. "Officer Hendricks," he said quietly, "you put a gun to the head of a man who spent 40 years protecting this country. You saw my skin before you saw my humanity, and you almost ended your career, your freedom, and your life because of it." Her eyes were wet now, red around the edges. "I made a mistake." He nodded once. "We all do. The difference is how we repair it." She looked at the soldiers around her, their faces hidden behind dark visors. She could see her reflection, small, broken, surrounded. Lang's voice came again, sharp as a command. "Officer, you are being detained for assault on a federal officer pending full investigation. Any attempt to flee will be considered obstruction." Hendricks' knees gave out. She dropped onto the gravel, hands limp at her sides. "Please," she whispered. I just lost control." Thompson stared down at her, silent for a long moment. The pain in his cheek pulsed with every heartbeat, but his voice stayed calm. "Control," he said, "isn't something you lose. It's something you give away." The words settled over the highway like judgment. Ramirez swallowed hard, then looked at the boy. "Jamal, you can stop filming now." Jamal shook his head. "No, sir. The world still needs to see the ending." Lang gave a short nod. "Let him finish." Thompson closed his eyes for a brief second. The heat, the helicopters, the chaos. It all blurred into one long exhale. He thought of Fallujah again, of the screaming, the dust. The moment he pulled a young man named Ryan Hendricks out from under a collapsed wall. The irony stung. When he opened his eyes, Lang was holding out an iPad, its screen glowing under the harsh light. "Sir," she said quietly, "we found something you'll want to see." The feed showed an old military photo, Fallujah, 2004. In it, a younger Marcus Thompson carried a wounded Marine out of smoke and rubble. The Marine's name tag read Hendricks. Thompson's breath caught. Ryan Hendricks. Lang nodded. "Her brother." Thompson turned slowly toward the trembling officer on the ground. "You have a brother named Ryan?" She nodded weakly. He's been in rehab for years. He never told me much about that day." Lang lowered the iPad. He said the man who carried him was a hero. Now you know his name, for the first time since it began. The live stream fell silent. No comments, no chatter. Just the sound of the wind and one woman's quiet sobs. Thompson looked toward Jamal's phone one last time. "End it," he said softly. "We've shown enough." And as the camera cut to black, the world took its first breath in 18 minutes. The wind carried the taste of sand and burnt rubber across the highway as the last helicopter settled behind the SUVs. The chaos had thinned into a tense, echoing silence. Colonel Victoria Lang, composed, deliberate, stepped toward the general with the bearing of someone who had done this before, extracted truth from wreckage. The soldiers fanned out with precision, each movement rehearsed down to the breath. Hendricks sat slumped against her patrol car, wrists bound, face pale under the unforgiving light. The dust stuck to her tears, tracing lines down the skin of a woman who no longer recognized herself. Before we move deeper, pause for a second. Where are you watching from? Hit subscribe. Give this story a like. And remember, what happens next shows how truth can strike harder than any weapon. Lang handed Thompson a canteen and a folded cloth. "Sir, your vitals?" she asked. "I'm fine," he said quietly, wiping the blood from his cheek. The wound's not what matters. She nodded once. Her eyes shifted toward Hendricks. Then let's address what does. The colonel signaled to one of her aides, who approached carrying an iPad sealed in a black case. She entered a code, then placed it on the hood of the SUV. We pulled this from the Department of Defense archive. She said, "Before we proceed, you should both see it." Hendricks' voice cracked. "I don't understand. What is this?" Lang's tone was clipped. "Military. A photograph, dated November 7th, 2004. Fallujah, Iraq." The screen flickered to life. The image filled it. A younger Marcus Thompson in desert camouflage, sweat and soot covering his face, carrying a wounded Marine through a haze of orange smoke. The wounded man's uniform was shredded, his leg wrapped in a field tourniquet. His name patch read, "Hendricks." Thompson froze. He remembered the heat of that moment, the blast that tore through the Humvee column, the screaming, the rubble. He remembered crawling through twisted metal to pull that young Marine out while mortars fell like thunder. "Ryan," he whispered. Lang turned toward Hendricks. "That man you just threatened at gunpoint saved your brother's life." Hendricks stared at the image, her mouth open, trembling. No, that can't be. He never told me." Lang's voice softened just a fraction. "He didn't need to. He carried the scar so you wouldn't have to." The officer's knees buckled. She dropped into the dust, staring at the screen as if it were a mirror reflecting everything she'd tried to bury. He said someone pulled him out, but he never said the name. He called him the giant from Louisiana. He said he saw light when everything went dark. Thompson's voice was calm, stripped of anger. That light was a flashlight taped to my helmet. He looked at her. This broken figure who, hours earlier, had pressed a gun to his skull. He was barely 21, he said. "Sir, my sister's a cop. She'll be proud I served." I told him to hang on to that. Her sobs came out sharp, uneven, like something cracking open from the inside. "He never told me it was you. He never said." Lang watched silently, her arms folded, her face unreadable. The soldiers nearby had turned their heads away, giving the moment the reverence of a battlefield prayer. Thompson took a slow step closer, his boots crunching against the gravel. "Officer Hendricks," he said, "I dragged your brother 200 yards through a street of fire. I lost 2 men doing it. And today, you nearly killed me without ever asking my name." She looked up at him, eyes red, voice hoarse. "I didn't mean to." He interrupted gently. "Intent doesn't undo consequence. You judged me by the color of a face your brother once thanked God for seeing through smoke." Her voice broke completely. "I was angry. At everything. At my life. At him leaving. At my ex. At this job. I took it out on anyone who looked like him." Lang's gaze hardened again. "And that's how prejudice works. It hides behind pain until it becomes law with a gun." The colonel turned to Thompson. "Sir, the Secretary of Defense has ordered full documentation of this incident. I've already secured a federal warrant for her body cam footage. Though she appears to have disabled it, we'll restore the data." Thompson nodded slowly. "Do it. Every second matters, not for revenge, for record." He turned back to Hendricks, who was now on her knees in the dirt. "Do you know what restraint costs?" he asked quietly. 40 years in uniform taught me one truth. Real power is choosing not to strike back when you can." She looked up, voice small. "Why didn't you just tell me who you were?" "Because I shouldn't have to," he said. "Respect shouldn't depend on a rank." Lang stepped closer, placing the iPad down beside Hendricks. "Your brother wrote a letter to the man who saved him." She said, "It was never delivered. The military found it during record review. He said he wanted to thank the soldier who gave him back his life. You might want to read it." The colonel unfolded a printed page and read aloud, "Sir, I don't know your name, but I owe you mine. If you ever meet my sister, tell her forgiveness is the hardest medal to earn. Semper Fi. Hendricks' head dropped, tears hitting the gravel. She whispered through them. He said forgiveness. He said that word. Thompson exhaled slowly, then started earning it. Lang gave him a small nod. Sir, medical team's ready. We'll escort her back to base for processing. He looked toward the sky, now streaked with orange light. No, he said softly. Let her stay for 1 minute. Let her understand what this moment means. The colonel hesitated, then gestured to her team to hold position. The highway had emptied. Even the wind seemed to pause. Hendricks lifted her head. What happens to me now? She asked. You face the truth, Thompson said. The same truth your brother faced in the desert. You survive it, or you change because of it. Lang's radio buzzed. Colonel, Austin Media is reporting live. The footage has been verified by the Department of Defense. Public response is escalating statewide. Copy that, Lang said quietly. It's already out. Thompson looked toward the teenage boy who had filmed everything. Jamal, he said. Thank you for being brave. Jamal lowered the camera, still shaking. Sir, I didn't know what else to do. You did enough, Thompson replied. You showed the world what words alone can't. Lang turned back to Hendricks. Officer, by order of Federal Command, you are suspended without pay pending full review. Your weapon and badge will remain in evidence. Hendricks didn't protest. Her voice was almost gone. Please tell my daughter. Tell her I'm sorry. Thompson's tone softened just slightly. Tell her yourself. But don't ask her to forgive you until you forgive yourself. Lang placed a hand on the general's shoulder. We need to move. Sir. He nodded. I know. As the soldiers led Hendricks toward the transport vehicle, she turned back one last time. The setting sun caught the tear-streaked dust on her face, turning it to gold. You saved my brother, she said quietly, and I almost destroyed everything he believed in. Thompson held her gaze. Then don't waste the life he fought to give you. The engines roared to life again. The helicopters lifted, scattering the last of the dust. Jamal's camera caught the moment the convoy rolled away, an image that would replay across the nation before nightfall. A humbled officer, a scarred general, and the silence between them where forgiveness had begun to take shape. As the sky dimmed, Colonel Lang's voice came over the radio. All units clear, incident secured, and in that fading light, General Marcus Thompson whispered to himself, some battles you win by not firing a shot. The evening sun was bleeding into the horizon when Sheriff Harlan Brooks's cruiser pulled up behind the convoy. He stepped out slowly, his gray hair stirring in the rotor wash, his expression carved in disbelief. The sight before him, federal officers, military command, a woman he'd once mentored sitting cuffed in the dirt, was something he'd prayed he'd never have to face. Brooks was old school, a Vietnam veteran who'd spent 40 years wearing the badge. But even he knew there were moments when duty meant breaking your own heart. Before I continue, take a moment. Tell me where you're watching from. Subscribe, and give this story a like. What happens here is what justice looks like when it hurts. Colonel Lang briefed him in clipped sentences. Officer Laura Hendricks drew her weapon on a federal officer. The victim is General Marcus Thompson. Brooks closed his eyes. Dear God. He walked toward her. Hendricks couldn't meet his gaze. Her face was swollen from crying, her hands still trembling from adrenaline. Sheriff, she whispered. I didn't know who he was. That's not the point, he said, his voice low and steady. You knew what you were doing. You've had 5 complaints buried because I gave you one more chance. But this time, Laura, there's no paper to hide behind. Her lips quivered. Please, sir, Let me explain. He held out his hand. Badge. Gun. The moment stretched thin and silent. She stared at him, realizing the weight of those two words meant more than any verdict could. Slowly, she unclipped the silver badge from her chest and placed it in his palm. Then, trembling, she handed over her Glock. The wind caught her hair as she whispered, "I never meant for it to go this far." Brooks looked down at the items in his hand, the same badge she'd sworn over 15 years ago. He remembered when she'd pinned it on. Her brother standing beside her in uniform, proud and smiling. Now, that memory felt like a cruel echo. "Laura," he said quietly, "you dishonored everything this badge stands for." She turned her head toward Thompson, who stood with Lang a few feet away. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "For everything." Thompson's eyes met hers. "It's not me you need to apologize to. It's the country you swore to serve." As the sun dipped below the ridge, red and orange light cut across the road, throwing long shadows. Lang stepped forward. "Sheriff Brooks, federal custody will take her from here." He nodded slowly, voice rough. "Let me do it myself." He approached Hendricks with a weariness that seemed to age him 10 years in a minute. "Turn around," he said. She obeyed. The cuffs clicked shut again, not with anger this time, but with finality. From the far side of the road, Jamal Carter still streamed everything. The live stream had passed 10 million views. News anchors were already narrating the moment across America. Live images show Officer Laura Hendricks being taken into custody. One voice said over the footage, "The man she detained earlier has been confirmed as General Marcus Thompson, the first black four-star general in U.S. Army history." Inside a classroom 50 miles away, 14-year-old Sienna Hendricks watched the same footage on a cracked tablet. Students gathered around her desk, whispering. One girl gasped when she recognized the officer on screen. "Sienna, isn't that your mom?" Sienna didn't answer. Her eyes were wide, glassy, unblinking. The moment her mother's face appeared, tear-streaked, handcuffed, something inside her shattered. She pulled out her phone and typed a single message. "I saw it all. You're not my mom." Then she turned off the screen and left the classroom without a word. Back on the highway, Hendricks' phone buzzed in her pocket. Brooks pulled it out and glanced at the message before slipping it quietly into an evidence bag. He didn't have the heart to read it to her. "Sheriff," Lang said, "we'll take it from here." But Brooks shook his head. "I'll drive her myself." Lang studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Understood. But the transfer will happen under federal record." As Brooks guided Hendricks toward the cruiser, Thompson spoke softly behind him. "Sheriff, it takes courage to fire your own." Brooks stopped, his shoulders heavy. "No, General, it takes shame. Courage would have been stopping this years ago." He opened the back door, motioned for her to get in. Hendricks hesitated, eyes full of defeat. "Sheriff, what's going to happen to me?" He sighed. "That's up to people higher than me now." As the car door closed, the journalist's drones began circling overhead. The live stream shifted from Jamal's phone to professional feeds. Helicopter footage showed the convoy of black SUVs, the sheriff's car pulling away, and the military transport truck behind it. The caption on every channel read, "Texas officer arrested after aiming gun at four-star general inside the car." The air felt heavy. Hendricks stared at her reflection in the reinforced glass divider. "He saved my brother," she whispered to herself. "And I aimed a gun at him." Brooks didn't respond. The road hummed beneath the tires as they pulled away from the scene. Back at the command post, Lang's phone buzzed with breaking alerts. CNN, BBC, Fox, all looping the same headline, the clip of Hendricks screaming, "On your knees," had already been replayed over 10 million times. The Pentagon had issued a statement confirming the general's safety and the initiation of a federal review of racial profiling cases across Texas law enforcement agencies. Thompson stood beside the SUV. Watching the sun disappear, Jamal approached timidly. "Sir," he said, "I just wanted to say, I didn't mean to cause all this." Thompson turned to him, eyes softened by fatigue and gratitude. "You didn't cause it, son. You revealed it." He placed a steady hand on the boy's shoulder. "You showed the world what happens when silence breaks." The boy nodded, wiping his face. "My dad says you're a hero." Thompson gave a faint, tired smile. "Heroes don't like hearing that word. We just do what has to be done." Lang joined them, her voice calm but firm. "Sir, the footage has been authenticated. The governor's office is requesting a briefing. The Attorney General is on standby." Thompson looked out over the horizon, where the lights of Austin flickered faintly in the distance. "Then we make it count," he said. "This can't end as another scandal. It needs to start something." Lang nodded. "Understood. In a motel off I-35, 50 miles north." Sienna sat on her bed, the room lit only by the glow of the TV. The reporter's voice filled the silence. "Tonight, the video that shocked the nation has surpassed 10 million views. The suspect, Officer Laura Hendricks, is in custody pending investigation. Sources say her daughter watched the incident live." Sienna pulled the blanket around her shoulders, tears sliding silently down her face. "She told me cops protect people." She whispered. "She lied." Meanwhile, back at the Comal County Sheriff's Office, the night shift clerk looked up as Brooks walked in, his face pale and tired. He handed over the evidence bag and sighed. "Book her under federal transfer," he said. When Hendricks stepped inside the holding area, she could still hear the faint echo of helicopters outside. The walls smelled of bleach and regret. She turned toward Brooks as he signed the paperwork. "Sheriff," she said softly, "do you think people can change?" He looked up, his eyes heavy. "Yes," he said, "but not until they stop pretending they were right." He turned away, leaving her alone in the sterile room, her own breathing the only sound. At 8:17 p.m., the major networks cut to a live update. Wolf Blitzer's voice filled millions of homes. Tonight, a shocking video out of Texas has ignited national outrage. The footage shows an officer pointing a gun at four-star General Marcus Thompson during what appears to be a routine stop. The Department of Justice confirms a federal civil rights probe is now underway, as Brooks drove home in silence. His radio played the coverage. The words, "historic reform" and "national reckoning" drifted through the static. He glanced at the sky and murmured to himself, "We've been needing this for a long time." And across the nation, screens flickered with the image of a badge being handed over at sunset. A single moment that told a story older than any headline. How power collapses when truth stands still. The sun had barely risen over Austin when the first crowd gathered on the Capitol steps. At first, there were only a few dozen, students, veterans, pastors, but by noon, the plaza was packed shoulder to shoulder, 12,000 strong. Signs waved above the heat. One phone saved a life, no badge above the law. Justice for all. The sound of chanting rolled through the city like thunder, echoing off glass towers. It had been just 48 hours since Jamal Carter's live stream, and the world had already turned. Before we continue, take a moment, subscribe, and tell me where you're watching from. This part of the story isn't about punishment. It's about what came next. How an entire state looked in the mirror and finally decided to change. Inside a marble courtroom downtown, attorneys from the Department of Justice unsealed 5 buried files from Comal County. Each one carried the same signature, Officer Laura Hendricks. Each name inside belonged to a person of color. False arrests, unlawful searches, charges dropped quietly after settlements that never reached the news. The total payout ordered by the court that morning, $750,000 in damages. When the verdict was read, Hendricks's attorney didn't even argue. She just lowered her head. The sound of reporters scribbling filled the silence. Meanwhile, in Washington, General Marcus Thompson sat before a Senate subcommittee, his uniform pressed, his face solemn. Racism in uniform. He told them, "Isn't a local issue. It's a national wound. You can't heal it with statements. You heal it with structure." Behind him, footage from I-35 played silently on a screen. Hendricks' voice, screaming orders, trembling with rage, was now a symbol of what unchecked power could become. Thompson didn't look away. He wanted every senator to see it, to feel it, to remember it. Back in Texas, the protests kept growing. Police officers knelt beside citizens, joining in prayer. Veterans saluted Thompson's name on signs, calling him a man who fought twice, once overseas and once at home. Jamal Carter stood on the front steps with a bullhorn too big for his hands, voice cracking with passion. "One phone saved a life. One video changed a state," he shouted. "If they can stop a general, they can stop any of us, but not if we keep the cameras rolling." The crowd roared in answer. Reporters captured the moment when Thompson himself appeared at the rally. He didn't take the microphone. He simply walked through the crowd, shaking hands, nodding, thanking people for standing up. Cameras followed him as he met Jamal and pulled the boy into a quiet embrace. "You did more with one phone than some do with 40 years of power," he said. "Keep that fire." That same week, the governor of Texas signed an emergency order. Every law enforcement agency in the state, over 15,000 officers, would be required to wear body cameras 24 hours a day, with footage stored on federal servers immune to local deletion. Training on racial bias and de-escalation became mandatory for all recruits and active officers. It was the fastest piece of police legislation in the state's history, and it bore a name written in bold ink: the Marcus Thompson Act. The general refused interviews for several days. When he finally spoke to the press, it was brief. "We don't need statues," he said. "We need systems that don't forget." Laura Hendricks, meanwhile, faced her own reckoning. Her trial was quiet, handled in federal court. She pleaded guilty to civil rights violations and misuse of authority. The sentence was symbolic. 5 years probation, mandatory rehabilitation, loss of her pension. But the real punishment was public. The name Hendricks had become shorthand for arrogance and bias. Her badge number a warning. Outside the courthouse, a small group held signs that read, "Forgive, but don't forget," after her sentencing. Hendricks entered a rehabilitation program in San Antonio. For a while, she stayed sober, attended counseling, tried to write letters to her daughter. But the guilt was heavier than the discipline. 3 months in, she walked out of the program and vanished for a week. When she was found, she was sitting alone in her truck behind an old Shell station. Empty bottles on the passenger seat. No violence, no resistance, just exhaustion. The federal agent who approached her later said she looked like someone who'd already served a life sentence in her mind, while Hendricks faded into obscurity. Thompson's influence grew beyond the military. He launched the Marcus Thompson Fund, a $2 million scholarship program for the children of racial profiling victims. The first check went to Jamal Carter, whose live stream had changed everything. It would cover his tuition at Harvard, where he planned to study journalism. When Thompson handed the scholarship certificate to him at a small ceremony, the cameras flashed, but Thompson didn't smile. He said only, "Use this to speak truth where silence still lives." The story reached beyond Texas. Universities debated the meaning of restraint in leadership classes. Churches used the footage as a sermon on justice and humility. Even the Pentagon released a training film titled Code Black, Lessons from I-35, mandatory for every new recruit across the nation. The phrase "zoom in on her badge" became a metaphor for accountability, a reminder that power must always be watched. 6 months after the incident, Austin unveiled a bronze plaque at the state capitol. It didn't show faces or ranks. It bore only 2 sentences. Restraint is the ultimate weapon. One phone call can end a system that night. As the city lights glowed against the Texas sky, Thompson stood at his hotel window overlooking the crowd below. The chants had quieted, replaced by soft music and candlelight. For the first time in months, he felt still. In his hand was a letter from Jamal, typed in neat black font. "You said courage is doing what must be done. I just wanted to thank you for teaching me that courage can also mean staying calm." He folded it carefully, placed it beside his Medal of Honor case, and turned off the light. Outside, the street still echoed faintly with his own words spoken months before. Words now etched into law and memory alike. Restraint is the ultimate weapon. 6 months after the Texas sunset that changed her life, Officer Laura Hendricks mopped the cracked tiles of a gas station off I-35, the same highway where everything ended. The Shell logo above the pumps flickered weakly, one bulb short, casting a pale light over the rusted pickup she now lived in. Her uniform was gone. Her blue shirt had faded to gray. She worked nights for minimum wage, sweeping cigarette butts and refilling windshield fluid, invisible to the travelers rushing past. Every time a patrol car passed on the highway, her shoulders tensed out of habit. The badge she once wore had been replaced by a plastic name tag that read simply Laura. Before we finish this story, pause for a moment. Tell me where you're watching from, and if this journey moved you. Subscribe and give it a like, because what happens next isn't about punishment, it's about grace. A low hum of tires broke the quiet. A sleek black SUV pulled up to pump 3. Hendricks barely glanced up, pushing her mop along the concrete. The driver stepped out slowly, tall, broad-shouldered, posture familiar. He wore a plain shirt and dark slacks, nothing flashy, but the calm in his presence made her look twice. When the driver turned toward the light, her breath caught. General Marcus Thompson. For a moment, neither spoke. The air between them was heavy with everything that had gone unsaid. Heat, shame, memory, forgiveness waiting in the wings. Thompson unscrewed the gas cap, inserted the nozzle, and glanced toward her. "Evening," he said, voice steady. Her throat tightened. "Sir." She couldn't finish. Her hands shook so badly that the mop clattered to the ground. "I didn't know you'd be here." He finished gently. "Neither did I. Just passing through." She swallowed hard, stepping closer but keeping distance. "I heard about your fund," she said. "The scholarships. Jamal Carter, right? He's going to Harvard." Thompson nodded once. He earned it. For a long while. There was only the sound of the pump clicking and the faint hum of the neon sign. Hendricks stared at the ground, words tumbling out. "I ruined everything. My job, my daughter, my name. I don't sleep anymore. I still hear myself shouting. I see your face in the gravel. I'm sorry, sir. I'm so sorry." He looked at her for a long moment, eyes quiet but not cold. "I forgave you on I-35, he said softly, long before the lawyers, before the cameras. But forgiveness isn't the same as forgetting. You still have work to do." Tears welled in her eyes. "I don't know how to start. Start with truth," he said. "Tell your daughter. Tell her everything." She nodded weakly. "She won't talk to me." "Then write," he said. "You owe her the truth, not your defense." Her lips trembled. She used to say I was the bravest woman she knew. Now she tells people I'm dead. Thompson's gaze softened. Then give her a reason to bring you back. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded envelope. Worn at the edges. Your brother Ryan wrote me last month. He said, he's in recovery. He asked me to give you this. Her hands shook as she opened it. The handwriting was shaky but clear. Laura, you once told me there are two kinds of battles, the ones you win with bullets and the ones you win with honesty. I lost mine for years, but I'm fighting again. It's your turn now. Forgive yourself, sis. You're the only one still holding the trigger. She pressed the letter to her chest, sobbing quietly. I don't deserve that. No one does, Thompson said. That's why it's called forgiveness. He looked out toward the highway. The air was cooler now, a soft autumn breeze replacing the furnace heat of that July afternoon. Do you remember what I told you that day? She nodded faintly. That restraint is the ultimate weapon. He smiled just slightly. And it still is. You couldn't control your anger then? Now, maybe you can learn to control your peace. They stood in silence for a while. Hendricks wiped her eyes, managing a small, broken laugh. I mop floors now, sir. That's my peace. He looked at her mop lying nearby. Then keep the floors clean, he said gently. Someone has to. When the pump clicked off, Thompson replaced the nozzle and closed the gas cap. Take care of yourself. Officer Hendricks. She flinched at the title. I'm not that anymore. You're still responsible for the badge you wore, he replied. That doesn't end with the uniform. As he turned to leave, she stepped forward. General, do you think redemption's real? He paused at the driver's door, the glow of the station lights reflecting off his face. It's real, he said quietly, but it's not a feeling. It's a lifetime. He gave her a small nod, then drove off into the night. The taillights faded into the horizon until they were swallowed by darkness. Hendricks stood alone under the flickering neon, clutching the letter to her chest. For the first time in months, she didn't feel the need to run. Across the state, life was changing in visible ways. The Marcus Thompson Act had gone into full effect. Every officer now wore a live body cam connected to a state server. In training rooms across Texas, recruits watched the footage from I-35 as a lesson in humility. Schools invited Jamal Carter to speak about journalism and truth. He told them, a camera doesn't change people. Accountability does. His Harvard scholarship became the first of 40 awarded that year. At the Pentagon, Thompson received the Presidential Medal of Freedom in a quiet ceremony. No parade, no headlines, just applause and a single line from the president. Some men fight wars abroad, others stop them from starting at home. Thompson bowed his head but said nothing. That evening, he stood on his hotel balcony overlooking Austin. The skyline shimmered gold against the fading dusk. On his phone, a notification appeared, an email from Sienna Hendricks. General Thompson, I saw the video of you forgiving my mother. Thank you for giving her another chance. I think I will too. He read it twice, then smiled softly to himself. Outside, the wind carried faint echoes of the protest songs that had once filled those same streets. And somewhere in the rhythm of that night, between the hum of the freeway and the glow of distant city lights, the story of I-35 settled into memory. Not as a tragedy, but as a turning point. Because in the end, it wasn't the gun, the badge, or the rank that changed Texas. It was restraint. It was truth. And it was one quiet act of forgiveness on a highway that had burned hot enough to forge a better world. Thank you for watching this story. If it moved you, please subscribe, leave a like, and share it so more people can hear stories that remind us what justice, courage, and forgiveness truly mean.